I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Gary Webb. I am an investigative journalist, and in 1996, I wrote a series of stories entitled Dark Alliance, which was about CIA involvement in drug trafficking.
I knew a man who once said death smiles at us all. All a man can do is smile back.
We've both been skull and bone, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go on.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the rest.
Number 322.
I have duty to report this afternoon that my friend and colleague, Tim Russert, collapsed and died early this afternoon.
I may die in this cell tonight or in the arena tomorrow. I am a slave. What possible difference can I make?
And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to another Already Dead, your favorite weekly conspiracy call-in variety show. Today we're joined by Monica, and obviously I have my co-host Austin with me. We're ready to get into it. We were talking about the octopus and all sorts of crazy conspiracy stuff before we got started. I did want to ask your opinion or your thoughts on something real quick. I was just thinking about it, Monica. We brought this up last week, and I believe it was the great follow Booty Boltzmann on Twitter that I saw brought this up, that apparently Danny Casolaro, the title of his book that he was working on was called Behold the Pale Horse. And then the year he died, Bill Cooper titled his book Behold the Pale Horse. You know, make of that what you will. I've never dug deep into it.
That was curious. Yeah.
I don't know if you have thoughts about Cooper or just that in general, because I've never dug into him too much. So I know everyone thinks he's a Fed, but I don't know.
Yeah, but anyone who, like Philip Marshall was another one who wrote The Big Bamboozle. Anyone who is killed for it, I feel like has some redeeming. You know, like they may be inside. I mean, Reagan, I'm sure, was somewhat inside. JFK was somewhat inside. Nixon was definitely a hardcore insider. I mean, they take people down because they have some, you know, I try to attribute it to a shred of integrity, and a shred is just cannot be tolerated. So anyone who dies for the cause, I feel like, and he was gunned down by the feds, right?
Yeah, something like that. I've never dug too deep into his death. Yeah,
I think he was.
He's actually in that supercut, that edit there at the beginning. He's at the very end, I believe.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah,
but Phil Marshall also like murder, suicide, killed his whole family and his dogs, and then killed himself. I'm like, definitely did not do that. And then one thing we mentioned in our like brief back and forth was about the Casolaro thing. There were some murders back in the day that's are covered in this book.
Triple homicide,
yes,
Fred Alvarez.
On Wackenhut, right, on the Wackenhut or Cabazon property.
Yep.
But I think it was only about 10 years ago, an investigator in Riverside County who was, I think he was a cold case investigator, Dave McGowan, his name was, which I'll never forget because it sounds like the great Dave McGowan, but it is not. But he too was probably great because I think because he was doing cold case files in that office, and there's like a 25-part series in the local news that you can find on YouTube about this guy. I believe he too is reported to have murder-suicided his entire family, killed 5 people and killed himself. I don't believe that at all. And so this thing continues to have reverberations today. Right. That one. But yeah, when these people die for it, you gotta.
I like just recently, within the past like 2 days, I was kind of like just trying to refresh my mind as far as the octopus and Danny Casolaro's case, like in general. And so I kind of like, have you read The Last Circle by Sherry Seymour?
I have it here.
Hell
I
yeah.
read a lot of it. I felt like she pulled punches, but I've said that twice already, and I haven't revisited the book in a long time.
Right.
She was also, I thought it was curious that the Netflix documentary, that guy, she was interviewed in that documentary, and I actually was, Ricky invited me on the Ripple Effect to interview
I remember that. I listened
Yeah,
to that.
so
Yeah.
I don't want to disparage the guy. It was very gracious of him. It was gracious of Ricky to include me, and
I was very skeptical of that guy. I will be honest, but I'm not trying to throw shots.
I hadn't watched the documentary until after I was, committed, and I went into it with an open mind, and it was like, I've noticed this also with the Son of Sam thing. They're great. They're like 95% there. And then that last little thing, just like, you're like, but that, and then of course, I don't know if they can't possibly mean for people to do this, but then like my next step is like, all right, I've got to read 5 books on this because I'm not buying that. So that she was included, but the great Jim Keith was not included in his source material. I just, but that's not me proving anything. This is me just, being a consumer of information that I find, I'm going to swear by this one I swear by.
Right. I do as well. But I will say, like, my takeaway and perspective from the Netflix documentary was, yes, there's value to it, because clearly it's at least so many people who have never been introduced to this subject with, at least, they've been introduced now, but at the same time, it feels a lot like a limited hangout, like most often is the case.
Limited hangouts, you're still hanging out though, so that's good.
That's what I'm saying. I get more out of them than they get out of me. I mean,
Exactly.
I absolutely do, and it doesn't. It almost gives you cover because they're bringing it out to the fore. They're not too worried about it anymore. I think it's called like they flood the zone, or it's the equivalent of Google bombing. Once they start talking like that, you can say whatever I think you can say and whatever you want, because they're no longer threatened. They've owned the narrative, and that's, it's not great, but I mean, what are we going to do anyway? Like, what are we going to do? How are we going to?
Some good examples of this, limited hangouts generally. I know between Candace and Tucker recently, Candace has been going on a tear about the Sabbatine Francus recently. And I was talking about this a while back before that, which I don't know if you've ever dug down that rabbit hole, but that's a fun one. Which kind of like, that's where you dig into the deep lore. I'm assuming maybe you have, I don't know. But, and then also Tucker just had on, Daryl Cooper, and they talked about World War II history and stuff. And I didn't watch the episode, but from the clips I've seen, it was pretty standard, like stuff that most, say, like people in our sphere, or whether even if you're just like a standard libertarian theorist kind of person, you probably know some of the alternative like history when it comes to World War II. Churchill was not the good guy. World War I as well. So it's like it is cool that these people are doing this now, because it's like, we were the crazy ones, and now it's like, if anything, now it just gives us more leeway to push the narrative even further.
Yes, that is true. And with Tucker, I don't know what he's up to now. They fall off my radar when they disappear from the mainstream, like Glenn Beck and Steve Bannon and people like that. I really don't pay attention to them once they go side stream. Like, there's a place where people who don't buy Fox News need to go somewhere, and you don't want them coming here. So you got to set up that interim spot.
That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah,
100%, especially since Peter Thiel is essentially funding Tucker's new show. So, I mean, that alone is like, I don't know, it raises a lot of red flags for me personally. But
I agree with you.
I just think Tucker's past, and
being a CIA agent, probably.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
and his dad was a huge propagandist. Yeah,
100%. So I will never not be skeptical of Tucker Carlson being some sort of,
My brother's a huge Trump supporter. My brother George, the friendly truck driver, and he's very funny. And he was so upset when I told him I thought Tucker was, not real. And he's just like, what evidence could you possibly have? Like everything that guy says is like right on the money. I was like, well, I mean, there's that thing like where he's like, I always vote Democrat and stuff. I thought that was weird. And then I showed him, he's like, he's just fucking around. I'm like, I think what he's telling you is he's faking everything. You know, he's saying, I'm voting Democrat because it's better for me. And I have to say, I was shocked when I grew up in New York, Democrat country. My father was a classical liberal, like a libertarian, traditional conservative is what he was. And he just taught me all about principles. I mean, politics were principles to me. That was it. And nobody agreed with this. So I moved to Texas and I was like, oh, this is going to be great. Everyone's going to be like that. And they were like, we're Republicans because we pay lower taxes. And, you know, we want this policy because it's better for my property values. I was horrified. But yeah, so that pragmatism doesn't impress me at all. I want nothing to do with that. But I think that's probably his personal viewpoint, and he's got a job to do. I mean, he's paid propagandist. Like, I don't think you need to know too much more than that. And the Anderson Cooper connection is funny. Like,
oh my
they're
God,
both, you know, they say they went to, I think they were in the
Vanderbilt.
same class or something in Yale.
Anderson Cooper's a Vanderbilt. It's
I
just
know.
so, yeah, it's so ridiculous.
You know, I think he's a closet heterosexual.
No way.
Kind of do.
That's hilarious.
That's a rumor with Buttigieg too.
Yeah,
it's funny to think.
Yeah, I just think it's funny that they're.
It is like how it's flipped, like all for like forever, for decades, centuries. These people have been blackmailed for being gay, and it's like, and now it's just going to be the opposite. They're going to get blackmailed for being straight.
I mean, you need to check a box, man. What's a white guy going to do?
Right. My God. Well, I was wondering because I think Sherry Seymour had gone on George Knapp's show. I think it was George Knapp's show back in the day. I can't remember when it was, but I had listened to it like a few different times because she had really kind of offered like a few different interesting perspectives on what had been going on at Cabazon in that interview, which I thought was just extremely important.
Yeah,
you know?
I bet I shouldn't slag her off. I don't mean to.
Oh,
like,
no.
Right.
I
don't know anything about her. I just remember thinking I want this to hit a little bit harder. But
no, I think
and she was also like very anti-Republican. And I'm like, look,
right.
If you
That's who she
actually
is, I think
that there's a moral high ground in DC, I mean, read some of these corruption files that I just every avenue I turned, and Biden is so ridiculously corrupt. I mean, don't even get me started.
No, I fully agree. I think she's much more of like an establishment style journalist, right? Where like she's very much playing the game in many ways. And so I think that always bothers me because you inherently pull punches when that's your approach and your perspective. Yeah.
The 11th commandment.
No doubt. And so I without a doubt, I agree with what you're saying. But during that interview, though, she offered this insane perspective as far as like she had mentioned that for 10 years prior to this basically this organization was created by local PD sheriff deputies and some some grand jurists, right, who basically formed this organization that was about Decency in Government was the name of the organization. And so it was after like 10 years straight of exploiting the Cabazon Indian Reservation, these few honest sheriff's deputies and grand jurors came together to form the organization. And then they proceeded to file a lawsuit against the Attorney General of California, the California governor, and the director of the FBI for dereliction of duty by knowingly allowing and facilitating drug trafficking and smuggling operations in the area, specifically in Central California at that time, right? Which is, it was like the base of Yosemite or something, where Cabazon was located, like not very far.
I think something might have been alluded to in this book that I just in that last chapter I covered.
Oh, really?
That rings a bell. Yeah. I mean, I could look it up.
Well, I know that several of the Indians, of the Native Americans there, they had claimed that they had been forced to participate in some of these criminal actions by local sheriffs, right? And local sheriff's deputies, essentially exploiting them as slave labor to produce certain drugs. So they were growing marijuana.
Wow.
And yes, it's so
No
crazy.
wonder the cover up is so
That's
the
what I
cold
mean.
case file and stuff. That guy could not make any headway. They really
Exactly.
stonewalled there
Exactly.
forever. Yeah.
And so operatives were flying small planes into the area using the reservation to smuggle in drugs from Latin America. And at the time, part of it was cocaine being grown in Peru, which was then processed in Colombia and was subsequently distributed out of Costa Rica.
And didn't the assassin in this book, I don't know if you read it, but there was an assassin who he was definitely responsible for one of the many murders that's covered in this book, but he kept going down to South America, and I think he kind of just disappeared into South America. And I can't remember his name, but there are pictures of him and everything. It's probably him.
Is that the dude that you mean assassin, the one that was theorized to have killed Danny, or is this a different?
The one who's theorized to kill Danny was Cuellar, Cuellar, between Jose and Monica Perez. We should be able to pronounce that, but I really can't. I don't know. And so he was the one who they thought killed Danny. Then there was the Nichols guy who was the real hardcore guy. There were a couple of Nichols in the book, but the one who operated out of the Whack and Hut Cabazon thing, that guy really killed people.
Robert Booth Nichols, something I can't remember.
There were two. I think the Robert Booth Nichols was a different super shady Nichols, but the John maybe. And there was an actual guy, I forget which. Maybe it was the triple homicide this guy was responsible for, but they pretty much had him dead to rights. And then, of course, he just disappeared. But there was a lot of South American stuff going on there, too. I mean, that's the thing about this book. Like, he just wanted to know about the software. Like, that was his big story was software. And he was so fascinated. Me too. Like, reading this book makes me nervous. Reading 100%. It, much less writing it. I'm just like halfway through because I don't always get through the whole chapter in advance. I like to try to make sure I can pronounce all the names and stuff. And sometimes I don't. And I'll get halfway through and I'll be like, oh, I don't really want to say this. That guy's still alive.
100%. The whole story of the Hamiltons and Inslaw and Promise and the two different courts ruling in favor of Inslaw and the Hamiltons to only be overruled, right? I mean, it's just Edwin Meese, the attorney general who worked in California.
All the Reagan guys. It really breaks my heart. I loved Reagan when I was a kid. He was president when I was a kid. He was so cute. And my mom was, liked him from the movies. And when he got shot, I cried.
Oh,
and
man.
I'm still I don't know how much of this they kind of cut him in on. I mean, he had to have known something was going on, but it would have been smarter to never tell him anything. And why would they? Right. It's really Bush. But I mean, they kind of forced him to take Bush, and then Bush tried to kill him right away. So I assume that the October surprise was Bush and all this stuff was Bush. So I'm going to give Reagan a pass on most of it because, again, he took the bullet.
Right. Yeah, I find
like Trump, you gotta.
Oh, don't do it! Don't do it, Monica. Oh my
God.
What's
your take on that? What's your take on that?
Ridiculous.
You think
Monica knows what's up? She knows what's up.
Within 5 minutes of the so my son called me to tell me that Trump was shot, and I was like, oh shit, mass trauma event. I'm just not in the mood. And then the second thing was he got shot in the ear, and I was like, that's a bullet to the brain, man. That guy is fucking dead. And he's like, oh wait, on the ear, it's okay. And I was like, oh, it's fake. Okay, whatever. I don't care about that. And I went home and I looked it up, and the first thing I see within 5 seconds was the picture. The blue sky picture in the background. And so I didn't say anything. I didn't say this is fake as shit. I just tweeted the Iwo Jima picture.
Oh my God,
a picture of the Iwo Jima statue. And I was like, oh, and that was because that morning before that, I had tweeted a side-by-side picture of the Sistine Chapel. And I think it was Zelensky and Biden. There was a shot of them, like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, they just can't come up with anything original. And so, I mean, I can actually look when that tweet was. So it was probably within an hour of the whole thing happening. It's just the Iwo Jima, which I don't even think now that picture was taken that day.
Sorry, I
I just-
shared the chat. I was just
it was-
laughing. Everyone always thinks that fucking Austin's a Jew.
We
get those
It's got to be my nose, bro.
Are
I think
you
that's what
Russian?
it is. No, I'm like Italian and Irish, basically.
I'm Italian, yeah. You got
Just
the
Dutch
Saracen
nose.
nose. It's
The
the
Roman nose.
it's the Saracens.
I got
It's
it
the
broken like
Arabs.
twice too. So
Yeah. Are you
didn't
Sicilian?
help. I don't know, honestly. I'm basically a mutt, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I'm a mutt too.
Yeah.
I'm Irish,
white.
German, and Syrian.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Oh, where the hell's the Perez come from? Oh, isn't that like a?
I'm
that's
married.
You're married.
Thank
Yeah.
God, because
Thank
my real name is like a unique name. It's there aren't any other ones out there, but
Mhm.
this, like, I mean, I think I have personally, hired a couple of people with this name. I just think it was like every maid and
Okay.
so it's so like weirdly anonymous that it's great because I got that radio show. I got a radio show in Georgia. I'm not a broadcaster or anything. It was just I stumbled into it. So when they gave me a show, I'm like, well, what am I supposed to call this? Let's just call it your name. And fortunately, my name was that at the time and still is. But it's fine. I'm like hidden in plain sight, I think. And I mean, you know what?
Right.
The reality is, of course, that there's no privacy.
Anonymity. Yeah.
Worried what they write down. I'm like, I'm not worried anymore.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
I mean, I'm so worried that I know there's nothing we can do about it.
Right. I mean, honestly, like malware basically overrides encryption, and people are like, I don't know. I think it's a huge scam, and essentially, as far as like government's going to access your information, your private data. I mean, it's just going to happen,
I'll tell you, there is a hierarchy though. So anything you write. So I know somebody who, I don't know how to tell the story without getting her in trouble. She did something bad, and she was just applying for a job, like a little thing. I can't tell you. It's not that big a deal. But anyway, they told her, you can do this thing for us, but you can never write it down. You can tell your friends, you can do whatever you want, but don't text it and don't tweet it and don't do any of that. Just don't put it in writing. And then somebody else I know was working for a company that was getting investigated by the government, and everybody had to give their phones, their computers, everything.
Oh, yeah.
And they went through like 10 years. It was 10 or 20. Are there even 20 years? But at least 10 years of text and emails. You could carve out who was personal. So it was really personal, your girlfriend or whatever, you could carve that out. But they took it and they're like, don't start deleting things because that will be big trouble. So there's that also. Wow. So you can talk on the phone is like not that bad. But there is a kind of cascading effect in person, obviously. That's why when I hear somebody's taking a trip somewhere, or when that Pavel Durov was arrested by the French, like, oh, that's perfect. Like they arrest you, they, maybe rough you up a little bit, and then you get your assignment and you're out.
Right.
Yeah, they released him recently. I think they just released him, didn't they? Just recently.
Which seems like they got what
96
they want.
hours. Yeah,
if that's
perfect.
the case, who knows?
Yeah, maybe
I don't know.
I don't know. I mean,
probably
maybe
I
the wall
expected them
later.
to at 96 hours because you're allowed to hold people for nothing in France for 96 hours, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And
sure.
yeah, and then he gets perfect cover because he's like, well, it wasn't my fault. Because in the beginning, I'd never heard of him. So I was like, who is this guy? Oh, that sucks. Free speech. Yay. I always start with that. I start with what's the narrative. And I try to just act like it's real and see if I can hold that position as I research. And by the next time, I was like, that guy is such a Western asset.
Right. Yeah, I think like the middle finger picture to Putin, I always thought was very strange, right?
Oh,
and especially
I don't remember.
Given the ultimatum to either give Russian, as far as the Russian state, basically a backdoor to his VK, which is basically a social media platform similar to Facebook, right? Yeah, I don't know. It certainly doesn't feel like Ross Ulbricht or anything like that.
Oh, Ross Ulbricht
I mean?
and Travis Kalanick. Nobody ever thinks about him, and I'll tell you about him. But I am not. I only started following this guy, so it looked to me not. I don't know if they wanted a full backdoor. That's what we want from him. But I think he was asking specifically for the Ukraine protesters, who are obviously
Interesting.
U.S. government employees. And
Right.
that's what Putin was asking him for. And he had just created this Facebook thing at that time. So it's my suspicion that he created it at our behest.
That's what it sounds like.
As a
That's
place
crazy.
for those people to organize a coup against the democratically elected government in Ukraine and consequently disenfranchise and murder thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So Putin's on the right side because we're on the wrong side. If it served him, and maybe he likes this country, maybe he doesn't. If it served him, I wouldn't put it past him to do lots of bad stuff. And I think he has done really bad stuff. I think the Chechnya stuff is really bad, or Georgia, one of those things, really, really bad.
I'm sorry, I had to do it, Monica.
All he did was say, "Get your effing spies out of Chechnya." No,
I just love that that's the narrative. It's so ridiculous.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, especially Uncle Russ. I mean, come on.
Uncle,
right?
Sarny,
Uncle Rustlin,
Rustlin Sarny.
And it's the Boston bombing for the people who aren't following.
Sorry.
Yes. That when Robert Mueller gets up and says, "We're looking for these two guys, thing one and thing two. And we think they're from Boston because they were in Boston. And just if anyone recognized these pictures," and I'm like, they're on your watch list. They live 1 mile away.
Yeah.
And besides the fact that they work for the CIA, but like even just the official narrative is that they're two guys on the watch list who live within 1 mile.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? We spend $1 trillion a year on defense. I don't understand how. I kind of feel like I could have figured it out just Googling it. Like, where is the terrorist watch list of people in Boston? Like those
definitely.
guys.
But especially how like his parents were like, I mean, didn't the FBI even met with the family, because the parents and the family and friends, at least everyone except Uncle Rustlin, they all maintain their innocence. I mean, basically to this day, for the most part, as far as I know. Yeah.
I had I had a conversation with someone connected to them once, which was weird, but I'll tell you about that.
Okay.
I didn't want to cut you off. I'm an interrupter.
No, you're good.
It's very annoying. I'm a New Yorker. I can't help it.
You're good. You do whatever you want to do, honestly. But my only point is that basically they were going as far to even say that the boys were both set up as well as being closely monitored by the FBI at the time. And in a series of like Channel 4 News interviews, which was, some British public broadcasting service, they were one of the only prominent media organizations willing to even allow coverage of the family, Zubadet Tsarnaeva, who was the mother of the two brothers.
Yeah.
And as far as like, she claimed that she knew the FBI was monitoring them because they had visited her home at least 2 or 3 times leading up to the bombing, and had also been in touch with Tamerlan over the phone. And the father, Anzor, he even said a year and a half ago, around 2011, they came to our home, 2 young people from Boston. They said they wanted to talk to my son. They came in, we sat down in the kitchen, them and us. They said, we're doing preventative work. We check out all the young people, they said, how they live, what they do, what intentions are for the future. They also said that here in Boston, we don't want our children to be blown up in the streets. That's their words. We want our children to be safe, they said. And Anzor continued to repeat the claim that Tamerlan had called his mother a few days after the event and told her that a U.S. security agent had called him and said he was suspected of carrying out the bombing. I just think that, like, especially when you have Uncle Rustlin, who clearly, like, changed his name after the event to Sarnai, right?
No, I think it was before.
Before?
He was hardcore.
Tamerlan lived with him for a time before he came to the U.S.
Rustlin was definitely an agent. So do you know about Rustlin?
Oh yeah.
His wife, Samantha Fuller Tsarnaev.
Oh yeah.
So Samantha Fuller Tsarnaev was the daughter of the CIA chief of Afghanistan, I think. Yeah, Graham Fuller, who's like in the Gallery of Rogues on Sibel Edmonds. And these guys were in his sweet spot for radicalizing imams to undermine Russia. So I remember a lot of the stuff from the family, Tamerlane's family, like the things that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I think they kind of soft pedaled it, or they were in the dark to protect them. But but Tamerlane went to a CIA training facility called the Jamestown Foundation, I think in Lebanon or something. And I think what got him kind of marked for death was when Russia made him. He was in there trying to radicalize the imams, and they said, basically, get your spy
out of here. Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, we need a patsy for this thing. Let's just kill that guy.
Yeah.
And then but the little brother, I feel bad because he was like a dental student. There was no reason to kill the brother. Yeah, they act like he's still
love
alive,
in the heart of the city. Stay safe, people. That was his quote.
Yeah,
that was his tweet that night.
Yeah.
And
most of his tweets were about Game of Thrones and pizza.
Yeah, everybody, the teachers they couldn't even comprehend.
They don't believe it. And then when he was on trial, I had already said he will never be seen again. And he wasn't. You got sketches and the family was like, it doesn't even look like the same person. The friends were that. And that's what I thought too. I was like, it can't be. But I, of course, could never get a glimpse of him. And that was one of the very few times, because I was on the radio, that positive. There's no doubt in my mind that what I was saying was kind of, they knew what I was saying. And then when I said that last time, I was like, we're never seeing this guy. And he had the trial, and I came back and I said, I told you, you'd never see that guy. Right after that, the Globe put out some like sketchy pictures of him.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that a few times with that one, and maybe Miriam Carey was another one where I feel like the narrative had to shift a little bit because of what I said on the radio. But see, I'm not on the radio anymore. So that I feel like that's like a thing that keeps you safe. Like if you don't have a lot of reach, I think the two things that really get people in trouble is if they're charismatic leaders, like courageous and charismatic leaders. And I'm really not a leader. I'm just an analyst. And then the other thing is if you have firsthand information, which I don't have. But one thing they told me, I remember some fan said, hey, you're going to get in trouble if you say that you're positive that Tamerlane Tsarnaev was the naked man. Why can't you just say that's your personal belief? And I'm like, no way, because I'm totally positive. There's no question. I was up all night. Like, I'm absolutely positive. And the guy kept saying, it's like, you kind of don't want to say that. You kind of want to stop saying that. And I was like, no. But I mean, and actually, when the guy in Florida was killed, Ibrahim Todashev, another totally innocent person, his wife called me from Russia. Or had me call her. That's why I knew it was Russia.
Oh my God.
Hard for me to call her from WSB. And I told her, I asked her, I was like, do the family not know that they were CIA, or the Tamerlane was a CIA agent? Do they not know Jahar is like not really Jahar? Right. And she said, what they say is that the government wants to close the case and they're pinning it on these guys, and it wasn't them. And that may be what the family believed, but it wasn't what I believed, but it may be what the family believed.
What now, if I remember, are you full McGowan? Are you full McGowan that you think it was an event?
Oh, I never watched his like 4-hour thing. I didn't even ever consider hoax stuff until long. I hope they're hoaxes. Hoaxes.
Yeah.
I think it probably was, only because are we you on YouTube? I don't think
okay. Don't worry about
it. Whatever.
I'm sorry.
Just kidding.
Okay. Yeah, right. I have no idea. But I feel like because people there, after the fact, a lot of people, they had mandatory grief counseling of all the first responders, people in the hospitals and stuff. And I think after you went to one of those, you just never said anything again. You never scratched your head. You never gave any details. And to me, that's like controlling a situation that it's like the FBI doxing people, like this January 6th thing. They visited anyone. If your face was on Facebook or the internet, whatever, they would come to your house. And that made everyone take their videos down. So now we can't reconstruct the day. We would have been able to reconstruct the day with millions of hours of video and seen exactly what happened, but they needed everyone to keep their personal eyewitness information to themselves. And that's when I feel like something's being created
Oh,
yeah, Jolly West was part of the in the aftermath of the OKC. He was helping out with the, I guess, people with trauma. Essentially, that's what he was trying to do. He was part of some sort of trauma team. I forget what it was called. He was working with the feds, and there are claims that they were people that were getting like kind of borderline bullied. I mean, take those claims with grain of salt, but I mean, he definitely was part of some sort of team. Yep.
Yeah,
It's also. I'm currently reading. God, was it Hoffman's book? And there's more claims on there's more specific claims about that in there. I don't remember I do remember Jolly West, but I don't remember her saying anything about him pestering people. But
there's Jim Keith was one of the first people to write a book about that, because Jim Keith died in 1999, and he, it's not definitive because it was just him scratching the surface back in the day. I used to have the book written by the governor's brother, and I have looked and looked, and I cannot find it.
I forget
the last jihad,
Keating?
maybe.
Yeah, something like that.
Keating.
It's like something jihad. It was like Keating. I forget the name of the brother, but but it was something Keating, because that was the governor. But yeah, it was what was the idea for it?
The idea was
it
was the year before OKC. He explains every single thing that happens, but he blamed it on foreign rather than domestic terrorists. And it was written by the brother of the governor who had just been elected. That's another thing that's always weird. Like, they just got
Keating,
elected.
Right?
Frank Keating was the governor, right?
Yep, I think so. I want to say it was Frank. Yeah.
It's just one of those things.
Yep, and he also seems like he had a lot of ties, pulling strings, what it seems like if you start digging into the particulars of it. Obviously, you can't prove anything because you're like 10 steps removed, but
how did he end up? Did he end up rich or promoted? That's
Keating? Well, I mean, I think the theory that Hoffman had was that like it looked like they may have been trying to groom him for some sort of higher level politics. I mean, obviously it didn't seem to go through, but I didn't really follow his political career.
And who knows what you promise the guy and how, what you have to deliver and what you don't have to deliver. And if they're smart, that they're going to keep their mouth shut, because you would stop at nothing to shut them up. I mean, you've got to.
Yeah, and sometimes things just don't work out. I mean, you look at our current political system and how they keep shuffling people around. It's kind of like, hey, maybe we did say we'd try to get you a presidential run or whatever, but it's like, man, I'm sorry, didn't work, didn't shake out. Don't know what to tell you.
Many were called, but few were chosen. I never understood what that meant in the Bible or whatever when until I noticed that, like with Obama, they and other like prominent positions. Apparently at that time, they wanted to have a black guy as president, and they had like 6 guys they had planted in various positions. That I think maybe the Detroit mayor was one of them, the Boston, maybe he was a mayor or something, or governor or whatever. There's just these guys that they just picked one out of, and that's kind of what I feel like with the elections too. They get a bunch of people who fit the bill, and they see what seems to be working, like that Ted Cruz, the blobfish. Let's see those. He looks like Eddie Munster. Yeah. He looks like the neighbor from Green Acres. He looks like blobfish. But I think that they would have gone for him if people would have rathered him over Trump. But like so many are called and few are chosen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is weird that Kamala would be the one chosen, but I do think sometimes you can push your way into it. It seems like I really don't feel like she was meant to be, but I don't know.
But she has this ethnicity that's so convenient, and that Trump, by the way, supported, gave her a little sheep dip on the Indian thing. So she's, because internationally, I don't think people care that much. They don't have the whole like. The greatest lever internationally is not a history of black slavery. That's our thing. So here it's useful for her to get that vote. But internationally, I think the Indian thing is more important. So when Trump said, oh, when did she start being black? It's like, I think they knew early on, the writing was on the wall that that's the box she was going to check for a long time. I think Willie Brown pretty much sealed that deal.
She paid her dues.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yes. So then Trump tweets, I mean, we're told in jest, here's Kamala, who's, always loved and bragged about her Indian family, here with her Indian family. And you put that stuff will circulate in India, and they're not going to say, but he was being ironic. He was being sarcastic. That doesn't mean anything. So I don't know. I mean, I know everybody is so sure Trump's going to win, but why squander this opportunity to, unless the next big thing is us going into Israel, in which case you would want Trump would be the actual scapegoat. Like you would put that on him and slaughter him instead of doing it to her. You want to keep that pristine. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see either way, honestly. I mean, it's like if Kamala gets in, it's a demoralization campaign. If Trump gets in, it's like we're going to co-opt the right to get back in program, back in lockstep where we want to be.
Real riots if Trump gets in.
Yeah,
real one.
I mean, they might try that.
That
either
might
way,
actually
so,
suck. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they might try that either way. I mean, I just had Radix Verimontal drop Friday. I don't know if you heard about that thing that happened in Virginia, the Kekawa militia, where they're you have to look into it. There's this guy named Ford Fisher. He did really good coverage on it. But there was talked about this a little bit last episode. But we like I said, it's gonna drop on Friday, so it will be a real deep dive for those interested. But this guy, super duper glowy. He literally admits he says he was CIA when he joined this militia. But then he's like, but I can kind of let you guys know stuff ahead of time type deal. And they're like, oh, okay. Which
that's great because we work for the FBI, and sometimes you guys are 2 steps ahead of us.
Yeah, and then lo and behold, this guy starts pushing these guys towards violence, talking about homemade explosives. And the one that really got me, because this whole story dropped before the assassination attempt, but then he made some weird comment to them about hey guys, what do we have any plan if a president were to get assassinated? He's trying to imply what are we doing if that shit pops off? And you're like, what? I mean, he ended up getting busted because the militia outed him. And then he ended up, they found ricin at his property. And then he got,
he was ready to, activate.
I mean, I don't know what all he was doing with it. I don't know what his ultimate goal was. He never really said, but I mean, he was looking at
provide the weapon.
Yeah. Yep.
So
yeah, he had given some dude a manual for explosives that was literally from a government organization. So it was supposedly it was unclassified, but was for official use only. So it was one of those things he's not supposed to be just giving out. So there's a lot of Fetty stuff. He tried to fake his own death after they outed him, not very well, which is what makes it kind of funny. There's a lot more to the story, but either way, he was a glowy, and I did find it interesting. That's this guy, what was the angle here? Because this is in the aftermath of Whitmer, before the assassination.
Yeah, they always seem to provide the weapons and stuff. Like the first World Trade Center bombing, there was some guy named Hector. It was such a sad story where he was so down on his luck. He was out of work. He had, I think he had separated, or he had a baby, and his wife was, I don't know what, a druggie, or he was recovering, and they just worked him so hard to do something bad. And they said, look, just go into Home Depot and buy a rope. If you will just buy a rope, then we can do this whole terrorist plot without you. That's all you have to do, because they needed him to do an act. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I would, but I don't have the money. And they gave him whatever it was, the $3.75. So, and then he's going to jail for 20 years. I wish I remembered his last name. I could probably dig it up. But so when I hear ricin or whatever, I feel like these guys, or the Ahmad Salem from the World Trade Center 93 bombing, which was supposed to do what the OKC thing did, but ultimately it took till 9/11 to get that USA Patriot Act, whatever. And with that, the undercover guy, the operative, was horrified that they used real explosives. They basically fired him because he wouldn't do the real explosives. So I feel like that's a tell, because the other guys are just being provoked. Okay.
Yeah, it checks out. One last thing before we get into the call-in thing. I did want to, the call-in portion of the show, I did want to bring up, and for those who just, the first time, we will go into a call-in. I'll put a number up. Also, we'll start interacting with the chat. But this is the 42nd anniversary, I guess the week, I don't know the exact day, of the disappearance of Johnny Gosch. I don't know a ton about that story.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones that always seems to come up in the tangentially in things that I'm studying, like whether it's like child sex rings and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It's always like that comes up. I believe it comes up in the Franklin scandal. I believe it may have been in Nick Bryan's book. There may have been a little bit in there. But
There's a
yeah, I
small
don't know if you want to
portion.
give a quick rundown, Austin, for those,
Yeah,
because I do
sure.
think we should at least give it a shout out.
Yeah, I mean, really just briefly, because I think it is one of the most important stories out there to at least be aware of, because it kind of implicates this much wider network that is clearly, deeply embedded in it for generations at this point. And especially when I realized that Detective James Rothstein, who has been a very, just he is such a valuable resource when it comes to this, because he was essentially in the late 60s. He was placed in charge of investigating sex trafficking operations, basically human trafficking, and it was really as a part of the New York State Committee on Crime, which I found very interesting. But anyway, that's what it developed into by 82, which is kind of a crazy story, because he connects all of this from Franklin to the Process Church, which includes some of them.
Really?
Oh yes, 100%.
Wow.
And so, but to briefly at least introduce to people who aren't aware of Johnny Gosch and his story, he's one of the very first pictures of a missing child ever to be featured on a milk carton. I think there was like a couple before him, but definitely one of the very first. And basically, he had been a paper boy in West Des Moines, Iowa, and come to find later, this elite individual within the network had a paperboy fetish, and specifically ordered through Michael Aquino, allegedly, the abduction and kidnapping of Johnny Gosch. And then there were other paper boys in the area that were also abducted. He was not the only one. It was like 3 in total. And then another one, which was apparently one of them didn't go as planned. And so they had to substitute in another child and abduct him. And that happened to be Jacob Wetterling, which is a ritual satanic murder. And yeah, it's one of the most insane stories that I've ever read.
I don't know that one. I know Johnny Gosch.
Insane. It's insane. And so anyway, shortly
Wetterling?
after
I don't know that one.
Yeah,
Where did you read about it? Is there a book or
just recently?
Right?
Yeah. I just mentioned it last week, but I had just recently discovered this story in an interview by Detective James Rothstein, who connected this all in with the Johnny Gosch abductions. And that was like, he to me is almost an undeniable source at this point. And especially when he's the guy, by the way, who arrested Frank Sturgis on the way to assassinate Marita Lorenz. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And interrogated him for over 2 hours. Right?
Wow. Did he cop to being a Fed?
Oh, hell yeah. He admitted to being on the grassy knoll, involved 100% in the operational aspect of on the ground, because Howard Hunt, he was basically running point from the grassy knoll as well, because they had stationed it's the craziest story ever. And Frank Sturgis ended up suing Detective Rothstein to keep him from talking about what he told him.
Wow.
It's one of the craziest things
why didn't they
ever.
just kill him, Rothstein? I guess it's too obvious.
I found it. Point. Yeah, it's pretty nuts. He claims that he's basically that there have been real efforts from the CIA to discredit him in many ways, and he's basically avoided that for the most part. Great, thankfully. But anyway,
I am looking into the satanic stuff, which I didn't really fully. I bought myself a crucifix because the witchcraft books are scaring the shit out of me.
Have you read I believe the something Chicken Hawk? Was it I just finished the book recently. I Have the Chicken Hawk. You read that, Monica? Oh,
so good.
Dark read, but it's one of those like smaller books, so you can kind of just get real through it like real quick. But good. Yeah, it's good. It's dark material, but it's basically about child sex or prostitute like rings type thing, and like connecting them from like was it North Fox Island and the Dutro, thing and all that stuff. By the way, guys, we're gonna open the phone lines today now. No ad read today, so we're old Nadeau's taking a month off.
Ooh,
So
I so miss having calls. That was the two things I really loved about radio. One was the calls, and the other was being able to reach people who weren't in the silo. So you'd reach across the aisle, it would freak people out. They would call and yell at you, and you'd be able to have. I didn't like being yelled at, but I liked being able to have. Sometimes they wouldn't yell at you, just have an exchange of ideas. But then when they got frustrated, they would start yelling at you.
Right.
But and also the calls, I really miss that. So I don't know if the calls are as good if they're not mad at you. I mean, it's fun, but it's something about like getting into it that really.
Well, I kicked someone out of the chat today, so maybe we'll have someone angry. So I don't know.
Really like that, but it helps elicit the nuances of the argument is all. If somebody's on the other end of the rope.
Yeah, definitely. Someone was talking a bunch of shit, and then I not too over the line, but I was like, whatever. I timed him out. I didn't ban him. He can come back. I don't know how long the timeout is.
Never ever. But had no rules for the screeners, nothing. They just couldn't believe it because I think people used to screen out the Ron Paul callers. And I was like, I love the Ron Paul callers.
Yeah, the best callers, man.
They must have hated me generally. I think they might have been, they used to maybe goof on me because I was conspiranoid, like, the radio station, like I was a novelty act or something. I'm like, hey, buddy, I'm actually right about this shit. Like,
right.
Yeah, this is going to check out.
By the way, Nicholas says
on Boston.
Nicholas says there's a $10 bet you're an episode away from doing Fox Island.
I already said I was going to. I know, man. I don't know.
I think you're like already almost there. We've talked about it a bunch. So I don't know.
I think to be honest, man, like I pivoted away from it for this next solo project because I've been in the darkness for too long. Too many consecutive episodes, and just for my own well-being emotionally, like you have to climb out of that darkness for at least a time. And I think for the most part, my audience probably feels the same way because it has been getting just excruciating when it comes to the details of some of these things, and especially the sexual abuse, and especially when it, in regard to children. So it's like
do a show on homesteading or something, life, bro. Renewal.
You know what I was thinking about?
Have somebody on who's
which
good
is
at that
stupid.
stuff.
I immediately was like, okay. I found out about this guy named Paul Kane, and he was like this kind of almost basically in the Branham circles of like becoming like this kind of the Jim Jones aspect of the disciples of William Branham. It's very interesting. And Paul Kane was one of them. And I found out that he became a priest, and he essentially was, deeply embedded with MK Ultra, which was something, I found.
Well, Jim Jones definitely was.
Oh, 100%. And so was this individual named Paul Kane. And he had this insane backstory where he basically had this like divine intervention at birth, which gave him this ability to become some sort of prophet. And it's strange, but he essentially used his position he would kind of scam them, like in the OTS. He would scam them by like launching these sort of like, he would have somebody on the inside that would like create this electrical outage at the perfect moment during his sermon. And so it would just like,
wow, that's good. That's clever. Of course,
legitimately using special effects,
stuff.
right?
Yeah, that's
it's like amazing. And but anyway, of course, I come to find that he utilized this position to surround himself with young boys who he then sexually abused. So I'm like, fuck, I'm not doing this. I can't do this.
You need a break. That is not where you want to go.
Not
next.
A break.
Yeah, Eye of the Chicken Hawk starts right off with snuff. That's like the first chapter.
Son of Sam. That is apparently what the Moskowitz murder was about.
100%. And he even said himself that there was filming going on. David Berkowitz during he said somebody wanted to film it for somebody else or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. It was an order, made to order.
100%.
And I would say get a chicken, like buy a chicken, grow a chicken, collect the eggs, but I think you have to murder the chicken. So you might have to just grow like a watermelon or something. Like do something a little less, something
For real.
that cleanses your soul, gives you a little. Or I always tell people go volunteer for Special Olympics, which you were talking about kind of the other day. About the lobotomies and stuff. My mother said Rosemary was lobotomized because she was promiscuous.
I heard this.
My mother remembers that. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, she said she remembered that. Anyway, but if you go work with those kids, you definitely, first of all, you got to run after them. So you can't be thinking about other stuff. And it's funny and fun, and it will definitely make you feel good. So you can put your feet back on the ground.
Right. No, I'm kind of desperate at this point, but you're 100% right about Stacy Moskowitz and her death, because it was almost without a doubt, it was filmed by someone who was hiding in the van. And
Radin, the guy's name is R.A.D.
Roy Radin.
Rich guy.
Oh my God. You look up this guy's mansion and what was going on there. And then his death being involved with, they were all in that network with the ritual murder of Arliss Perry and all this different stuff. And Manson 2, which is
Did they ever figure out who that is?
William Metzger, I'm almost positive, is Manson 2. That's who David Berkowitz himself said was Manson 2. And and his story is insane. But
totally gonna, because I'm reading the first edition of Ultimate Evil, because
hell yeah, Maury Terry's
sued by the OTO, so he took all that stuff out of subsequent editions, so it's not in the audiobook. And I'm going to do a show with the History Homos on this coming up.
Nice.
And they were listening to the book, so I'm going to have to fill them in on all the process of the OTO, because he had to take it out. But because I'm reading the first edition, it's old. It's like really old. It's 30 years old, and there's things have happened since then that I have to. And then I have to reread Program to Kill, because I'm sure those guys are just going to, well, that was chapter 7 of Program to Kill. Like, where have you been? And then there was a book that David Berkowitz sent to, I think, Maury Terry, where it said the stuff about the Arliss Perry murder. Did you hear about that? It's called Anatomy of Witchcraft. So I bought that. And now it's like on my bedside table, which is why I'm wearing a crucifix.
Yeah.
Because
compensate.
It says right in the book. It is like they don't like that. I'm like, okay. Number one.
Did you hear that?
Every color.
That basically, the Ultimate Evil is just the perfect name for this story.
Yeah.
Because
it a quote in
truly within like the principles of the doctrine of the process, like I'm very into, of course, like the OTO, Aleister Crowley sort of vein, but with Robert de Grimston, I mean, Marianne McLean, his wife was married to L. Ron Hubbard, by the way, which is one of the craziest things of all time. Yeah, and basically,
I read a lot of stuff about Jack Parsons, Second Rockets, because I moved out here, and there's a huge building that says Parsons, and there's JPL, and like it's huge. It's a NASA base basically, and I keep looking to see if I see like a little Mars rover. I'm like, oh, maybe they do it here.
Right. They're all tied
They do it on Devon Island.
Manson was huge into Scientology.
Oh, yeah. Look at Devon Island. You will not believe in Mars anymore.
Dude,
say it again, Jose.
I said Manson was huge into Scientology, too, apparently. Like, I've been digging into that a little bit,
dude.
Which I guess that then kind of provides the connection to the Process Church. So...
Yeah. I'm just getting to the end of Ultimate Evil, and they're starting to get into that Michael Carr and the Scientology and all of that.
It's nuts.
Clearwater and how they like cleared that out. Yeah, there's a lot, and it's big here. There's a huge, I don't know where, I might have started here. There's a huge Scientology thing on Main Street or Old Town, whatever they call it, Pasadena. And then there's a Planetary Society, which was Carl Sagan. And that is definitely headquartered here, but it's also where the Right to Life was headquartered back in the day. Like, this was a kind of a battleground, I think, and that they did busing to kind of break up the community, I think. Just swapping where your kids go to school from where you live, it hurt all the families, like the black families, white families, everybody. It totally screwed up there.
No, my parents went to school out here during that time. Yeah. It's crazy. Like the stories my dad would tell me about growing up, going to Banning High School. Like, it's insane. Riots they would have
bused to a different high school than his own?
Yeah. And what's crazy is that basically like I remember he told the story of what the fallout after MLK. I found an insane story, dude.
Yeah.
Like, complete riots at the school where, I mean, you're just getting
That's what they
haymakers
want.
to getting haymakers to the face. You don't even know where it's coming from. Like he's having to run down in the basement in the library to like escape.
Wow.
Yeah.
And to think it was our own, it was, isn't the rumor that it was Jesse Jackson in conjunction with the FBI? I mean, really, like that's
so
that's
crazy.
the rumor.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nuts.
And
Go ahead. Sorry, you got something else? I thought you were coming to the end of your. If you have something else to say, Austin, I just was going to bring up this.
Dude, I could go forever about it. I still haven't even finished Johnny Gosch. We're supposed to do an overview. I didn't do that at all.
Speaking of Gosch, I guess this brings us back to it. Our buddy Dr. Corbo.
Really?
I don't know how legit this is. I mean, it's just something I've never really dug into. He's saying, if you want a real wild ride, go compare Noreen Gosch, her contradictory statements, her spooky friends, etc. And remember, you can't question her because she lost a kid. And then there's more to it, too.
Interesting.
And if you want a real rabbit hole, go compare all the photos of Johnny Noreen has released. He's blonde, and then he's a ginger with freckles, then he's a brunette, quite the shapeshifter.
Really?
So, yeah.
Well,
and then also, one more. Mae Brussel got death threats from Aquino over the Johnny Gosch stuff. You know Michael Aquino.
I got to dig into
Ted
more
Gunderson's best friend he spoke to on the phone every day, which I don't know anything about the Gunderson
Aquino is the guy
connection.
who armed the Black Panthers. He's the guy who, and let me just tell you how entrenched that story is. My son, who has Down syndrome, he likes to read Wikipedia, and he said something to me about the Black Panthers. He said, I want to join the Black Panthers because they advocate for disabled people. And I said, and I was going to say the Black Panthers were infiltrated by, I was going to say terrorists, just because the kid has Down syndrome. And like, I don't want to really get too deep down the rabbit hole. So I said, that was infiltrated. And he goes, by the FBI. And I'm like, what? In Wikipedia. Anyway, Aquino was that guy. That's how, I mean, if that's not even a rabbit hole anymore, then think of how many rabbit holes are below where we're all like operating.
And there's so many connections between like the infiltrators in the Black Panther movement and also the Patty Hearst story, which that whole story is insane.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, they were, I mean, it's insane what they basically just created out of whole cloth. A lot of those different radical groups within the prison system. And anyway, it's just mind-boggling to me once you get into it,
I did listen to a 90-minute interview with Noreen, and I don't know who it was. I feel like it was, Art Bell or something. Some legendary guy, coast to coast. I don't know what.
Yeah.
And it was a fascinating story. And then she definitely had her story, but that happens a lot. If you interview people who do a lot of interviews, they have their thing and they don't even hear your questions really anyway.
Right.
But when she brought out that it was her, that it was her husband who arranged for the kid to go by himself on the paper route, which he never ever did. That was a huge accusation, and I wanted to know more about what she was talking about. And now someone's saying that her story doesn't really check out. It is a very strange story because he's alive. He went and visited her one middle of the night.
That's what she said, yeah.
And then he went to an Indian reservation and all of that. I mean,
stop it. That Detective James Rothstein brought up this Indian reservation and a pipeline through there that was basically.
Oh, right.
I'm telling you.
Right. That's what you were saying.
Yeah. It's insane and apparently there's something called the Underground Railroad that exists to this day that is basically to get these children, these victims of child abuse from these networks and to get them out. And apparently it runs out of that Indian reservation into Canada, which I found interesting. And I guess a priest is involved. And so some other official who are involved trying to prop up this pipeline to try and, hopefully rescue some of these kids and victims of abuse. But
I wondered why he wouldn't go have a relationship with his mother.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not jumping on the
I
bandwagon
heard
of that comment, but that's something that I thought was weird. There's just a lot of weird things. But of course, maybe the agreement on the railroad is just stay out of sight forever. And you'd be like,
That's
yeah,
possible.
definitely. I can't trust anybody anyway. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was in '06, I believe, when his mom said that she found the photographs on her doorstep depicting Gosh in captivity.
oh yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I have to say, I tell you, I might have told this story once or twice before. I left home when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people in my family left younger, but I left when I was 17. I dropped out of
Mm.
high school and I went to Colorado, and I had I had a fake ID, and I was a waitress. And I worked in I worked at a restaurant, and we went out to drink for drinks afterwards. And some guy was talking to one of my coworkers, and then that guy came up to me and started talking to me. I don't know if he gave me his number or he must have gotten my number. I can't remember. And then the waiter came up to me, my friend, and he said, I don't actually know that guy. I saw you talking to him. You might think that I know him, but I absolutely do not know him. And he did kind of like, the stranger kind of said that he knew that guy. Anyway, I didn't really think too much about it, but the guy called me. And he said, oh, you're gorgeous. I want to make you a model. And I was like, of course, like a 17-year-old girl, you can believe that. So I was like, but I think I'm too short to be a model. Like, I'm, not skinny. Like, that's weird because I definitely can't be a model. So he was almost had me going. And what he wanted me to do, he said, it's the modeling agency is out of Dallas. You'd have to fly to Dallas. And I found out later that that's a hub for trafficking to get people out of the country, or it was at that time. And I literally was like almost ready to bite. And then he said something which was so crazy that I was like, what? He said, do you have a boyfriend? Or, it didn't actually say anyone who would miss you if you disappeared, but it was like almost that. And I'm thinking,
God.
that seems a little weird.
Mm-hmm.
So I did not allow myself to get abducted. But that's that. I'm confident. Like, also the other weird thing I did is I went to a meeting at the Hyatt Ricky in Palo Alto. When I was going to school, they said that they were going to get on a spaceship and leave the planet. And a friend of mine was like, let's go check it out. And we went, and they were all wearing purple polo shirts. And they were telling us all about how the spaceship's going to come.
Oh my God.
And take them. And it was the Hale-Bopp comet thing. And they all killed themselves. And I'm like,
Heaven's Gate, right?
Yeah, you brush elbows, but you don't realize
Holy
like this
shit.
stuff so you're like, how do people fall for this? Where do they recruit? They're always doing it. And if you're vulnerable, and of course, drugs play a huge part in the satanic thing. And because then you really don't have your faculties, and they can target you because you don't have, if you
100%.
don't live near your family. And of course, going off to college, you're far away from your family. They recruit at colleges. I never even heard of Arliss Perry, who was murdered at Stanford. And I went to Stanford as a graduate school, but I was in that church. Nobody ever told me. I mean, that was very thorough. And there were other murders around that time.
Exactly.
Including Chuck Taylor's daughter was murdered because there was another serial killer, and they kind of lumped Arliss Perry in with that. He killed numerous teenage girls. I think he wasn't caught until he was like almost 80. But Chuck
Stanley
Taylor's
Baker, he's like a cannibal psychopath who was involved in the process. He actually basically claims that he was recruited on a college campus, right?
Going to college?
100%. Yeah, he claims that he was recruited on a college campus. He's like, according to Terry, basically this guy, Stanley Baker, the cannibal, right? It's pretty nuts because
that was in Maury Terry's book.
Yeah.
Well, is it at the end of the book? I got it.
Michael Brescia, one of the main guys in was it the ARA? Strassmeyer's homie. He was in college, and then within like in a few months, and all of a sudden now he's in fucking. I actually just got that book. Oh no, actually not that book. Is that the Ham book or no? Which one is that? Bad Company. That's the one I was thinking of. I mixed those two up for some reason.
I don't know why I have all these books on my desk. I really literally have like.
But yeah, Brescia went from like college, and the next thing you know, he's like, "Oh, now I'm in Elohim City," and you're like, "What the fuck?" So I mean, it looks like.
Yeah, what does that?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm like, because he was just some young guy in college, kind of looked like a preppy looking kid, and then nope, next thing you know, I'm a full on fucking white supremacist Christian identity, whatever the fuck, hanging out in Elohim City. So yeah, it's weird how that works.
Yeah, it is weird how that works. Like, I just don't know what they do to these people to get them on board.
I mean, my theory is that they got busted for something, like, I don't know, like, out drinking at a college party and something goes wrong with some girl and you're like, hey, well, we can make this go away, something like that. I have no idea. I'm just theorizing. That would just be like,
because that actually is something that happened at Stanford. That guy and the girl like didn't even remember having absolutely drunken sex. Like neither of them remembered it.
Yeah,
but the Swedish bicyclist called it in, and then that guy, whatever, lost everything. And the dad wrote a letter like, "This is ridiculous. Like they don't even." And then they threw the book at the kid once the dad said, "This is going too far." But who knows? Yeah.
It just seems like a place a lot of people with promising futures make a lot of mistakes because it's the first time they go away from home. They're having fun. Things get wild. They get a little bit loose, and something happens. And DUI, rape, whatever, something. And then you're like, oh, well, hey, we can make this go away.
Arliss Perry's husband became a very prominent child trauma psychiatrist. I mean, I don't think there's any suspicion surrounding him at all. Do you?
I don't think so. I think much more suspicion on the security guard who I believe was involved.
He definitely did it because he killed himself when they went to arrest him.
Oh, well, I
kind of video of that.
I know. Well, I just talked about it like recently.
Hold on, I missed that. Sorry.
Bring that back up. We just let us get to the point, and we'll start getting to some questions. So we have a few in the chat that I want to bring up. So, but finish what you're saying, Austin. No, you're good.
What the hell was I just saying? I just lost my
about the guy who there was a video of the guy killing himself.
Oh yes,
when the cops went to arrest him.
I can't recall the details perfectly, but what I remember was my takeaway from it was basically he was willing to talk at this point, and in order to make sure that he wouldn't talk, right? That this was essentially he was either killed or 100% didn't have a choice. Which I think
it's the family. It's the family connections. I think that's how they get the Masons, the high-level Masons, to keep quiet. And Berkowitz said he was so worried for his father. You have to give them pictures. The
safety of his family. That's what he was talking about. And by the way, Dr. Corbeau's, he mentioned earlier, just kind of like alluding to the idea that maybe we should be a little more skeptical of Noreen Gosch. I find that interesting because that perfectly aligns with the Jacob Wetterling case. His dad is implicated as the one who essentially committed the satanic ritual killing of his own son with another individual.
Noreen pointed the finger at the father, but no one's ever heard from the father again. Disappeared completely.
That's so crazy.
Many such cases. It does seem like when you do
he doesn't have the counter
cases that it's not that uncommon that
it was in Wyoming at a campus setting. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jose.
No, you're good.
I just remembered just now that cannibal Stanley Baker that I mentioned. He was recruited on a campus setting in Wyoming, and basically it came to the attention of the authorities that reports of human sacrifice were relayed, and including one from a gentleman named Stanley Baker, who was himself arrested for an out-of-state murder. And he was a member of the Santa Cruz cult and carried a finger bone from his recent unfortunate victim in a leather pouch. And upon his arrest, he delivers, this is so crazy. This is what he says to the authorities. I have a problem. I'm a cannibal. And then he sported a swastika tattoo and other occult emblems. And this is when he says he was recruited from a campus setting in Wyoming and participated in blood drinking rituals there, which apparently he was also further programmed and then joined the California activities.
Well, they loved Hitler. That kept coming up.
All right.
Well, I know,
how Santa Cruz became the vampire capital of the world.
Let's
I'm reading an article on the SFK.
Oh my God.
The cult 80s film The Lost Boys turned Santa Cruz into the vampire capital of the world. The unholy history of Holy City. I never even heard of this before.
Yeah, it blew my mind. I'm not sure, honestly, if Maury Terry did put that in the book. Now that I'm saying it out loud,
I
because
mean, it
I'm
might
pretty
be.
sure
I keep
that.
falling asleep. I read it in bed, so I can't. Like, I miss
Okay.
every fourth page because I fall asleep by the time I get. So I definitely could be there, and I missed it. But this is crazy. Holy City, headquarters of California gubernatorial candidate William Riker, circa 1940. The Holy City. I guess this is the unholy history of Holy City, the Bay Area's most racist tourist trap.
My gosh.
So
All right,
I'm going to dig into that. That's interesting.
Let's read this question real quick. Nicholas Lee, did Monica ever get notes from the radio station regarding some sensitive topics like Boston and Schmandy Schmuck? That's what we call that on the show.
Yeah, I understand. So when I did that, there was only one time, and it was just a very personal matter for a relative of the family, had absolutely no news value whatsoever, and they're just like, don't make fun of this person, like it just whatever. It was nothing. So I never ever got censored ever about anything. This is what happened though. I had a producer who really rooted for me, and she just did not want me to blow myself up. And she said, it was the Boston thing. And she said, if you come out and say what you think, people are going to think you're crazy. Like, talk about something else. And I said that, and I wasn't even like taking a stand. It was so nerve-wracking to do a live show where people were calling, and I was filling in for somebody during the weeknight. So it was like probably hundreds of thousands of people, which is nowhere near what I used to get on the weekends. And it was so hard to like deliver a great show. And my whole thing was like, I still try to do this, but it's not like then I have to figure this out. I have to come with something original, and I have to really know my stuff, because people are going to call, and I need to be able to tell the truth about be able to argue with them, because it was always combative. Right. And I said, this was the day after it happened, and I was going to go on not too long after that. And I said, I can't go on if I can't tell the truth about this, because I have nothing else to say. She's like, well, say this, say that. I'm like, everybody's saying that. I'm not doing that. And I don't really believe that. I don't even think it's important. I can't do it. I cannot do it. Yeah. So she called the program director. We were all friends. Like I'm still really good friends with her. I love her. She was really just trying to look out for me. And he said, if you really believe it, if you've got something to back it up, and you make it crystal clear what you know happened and what is your opinion, go for it. And he said, the one thing you never want is for people to go running and screaming like they just witnessed a car wreck. But what he meant by that was like, if you crash and burn, like you could talk about a car wreck. They don't mind an actual car wreck, but if you're a disaster, he's like, don't be a disaster. I'm like, I'm not a disaster. I get it. I figured this out. I was up all night. I know what happened, or what didn't happen. And I'm going to tell, because the Naked Man, CNN showed the arrest of Tamerlan Tsarnaev, and he was naked. He was naked. And that's important because he had done a complete spread on being a boxer. So I had 10 pictures of him naked, basically, from the waist up. And I was like, I have never seen nipples like that. They're like sticking out of the side of his body. They were low and outside. Like they were just weird. He had these square rectangular pecs. I'm like, that's that guy. And that's when I got the call saying, you should stop saying that you know that. And I was like, oh, I definitely know it.
But Tamerlan's own mom and closest friends this day identified Tamerlan being taken into custody alive as the Naked Man from Waterton, only to be pronounced dead upon arrival at the Beth Israel Medical Center early Friday.
So I never thought of it before this moment. That's proof that he was a CIA agent, because that article on boxing, have passport will travel, something like that, or have passport will box. He said that he wanted to be on the U.S. boxing team, and that he was wherever from Chechnya, and that his wife was Portuguese, and that he had no American friends. So his wife was Catherine Russell, whose grandfather was a CIA agent and, went to Yale and all that.
Graham Fuller.
She really, I'm going to say that was the woman in the pictures who he said was Portuguese. So that was a sheep dip or whatever. And you know, that's not what you do to when you're radicalizing somebody or any of that. That's an operative.
Right.
And I'm sure that thing is scrubbed, but I
bet.
like cracked the code. And then when I had the pictures, I had like 4 pictures, which was very, very clear. And I had all of the video and audio of people calling in saying, I saw the shootout. It was a green car. They surrendered. I had all the audio. And, you know,
that Danny Mang dude, his story is so ridiculous. The story of the abducted car.
He was a white guy at first. So
he's the Asian guy.
No, that he wasn't really. So I have an article of the guy. There was a Middle Eastern gas station owner. He said the guy came in. I almost feel like it was maybe a gay guy. It was like a white guy ran in. Somebody hijacked my car. I don't think it was the
screaming at the
Tsarnaevs. Yeah, I don't think it was the Tsarnaevs. They had a car. They didn't.
Yeah.
The
Why would
black
they?
Mercedes was a cop, in my opinion. Yeah. And then they just changed it to this Asian guy. And the only person who interviewed him was a guy who used to be the FBI PR person, John Miller, I think. And he's also the only person who interviewed Jahar Tsarnaev, which was a great interview because Jahar was dead already. So I would say like that guy gets a Pulitzer for best interview of, in human history. So
who do you think killed the MIT police officer?
Who killed the MIT? No,
I'm just
totally
like
unrelated, in my opinion.
You think so?
Totally unrelated. Those 2 guys were hit for some reason. Donahue and Collier at the same time.
Yeah.
And then Donahue supposedly was there were 6 Watertown cops and this Boston Transit cop who had just witnessed the murder of his friend from the academy. And he, for some reason, zips to Watertown to fight this fight and gets shot in the thigh, which I predicted would be a friendly fire, and it was.
Oh
my God. They're going to find. So those guys were slaughtered for some reason.
That's nuts.
Hit. Well, maybe it's related somehow because it was the same day, but there's no way in my opinion, there's no way.
I was just wondering, like, if they saw something they shouldn't have, or what. I'm not, you know what I mean? I was just trying to consider.
That's possible. Yes,
that's
possible.
motive.
Yes, that's possible.
So strange,
right,
and especially. Go ahead, dude.
I was going to say we have from Fire Pixie. So was Donald DeFreeze part of the Zebra murders? I'm not familiar with Zebra murders. Maybe one of you two are. But Donald DeFreeze, for those who aren't aware, was the head of the SLA, which that is the people who abducted Patty Hearst. So do you know what the Zebra murders are, Austin? This seems like it'd be up your alley.
No, honestly, the Zebra murders specifically, it's not ringing a bell for any reason.
All right, well then back to what you were talking about. I didn't know maybe you did. I know you've done a much deeper dive on that than I have. So
yeah,
I mean, I'm aware of who they are and stuff, but I don't know about that. So
I know that, I mean, like once you get into the Cinque de Freeze and like this whole, it's so convoluted and there's so many details that are required to understand what was happening at the time using the California prison system to essentially, run covert operations. I mean, that was actually what was happening, and it's completely insane. Yeah, Manson was at the same place that Cinque de Freeze was at. It's the most ridiculous.
That's why that book Chaos, it didn't really. Did you feel like that really?
It left out a lot. The more I dig into Manson and stuff like that, the more I'm like,
I wanted left out. Yeah, I wanted.
I mean, as deep as he went was basically just. I'm sorry, but just the connection to the his parole. When he absconds back up to San Francisco, right? I thought really that was like most of the most damning, I think, revelations in Chaos, to be honest, was basically just kind of charting that course of how he had been so heavily influenced at Haight-Ashbury, and so at least there's value there. You know what I mean?
Oh, there was tons of value, tons of value. I really enjoyed this TV show called Aquarius. It was David Duchovny, and he tried to make, I'm sure he produced it because he's like this old guy sleeping with all these young women and he's like a sex maniac, whatever. And Adam, I guess. So, but the show got canceled, but there's still a couple of seasons where it just takes place around the Manson thing and Black Panthers. And it's just a weird little show that I'm sure it's probably free.
That's nuts.
Anyway, but yeah, so I always confuse like what was in that TV show and what was the real thing. But I want them to show what I wanted Chaos to get into. Basically, Jolly West programming Manson, MK Ultra style in one of the many institutions where he lived. And that's all I really wanted to get details on. And I don't feel like I got it.
I think he did go into that a little bit.
Did he?
Now that I recall, like he did go into Jolly West because he did really delve into the Jolly West stuff, his time in prison. I don't know. I don't recall him making a direct connection. I remember he brought up the Haight-Ashbury stuff. Now the prison, I don't recall
the
him
clinic.
saying,
That's true. He really got into that.
I don't recall him mentioning anything about Jolly West in prison, but he did definitely bring up or alluded to MK Ultra experiments, in there. And I believe he was implying it had to do with his kind of almost his handler, which ended up being his probation officer later, if I recall correctly. Yeah,
and that's why it was very strange because why I mentioned him absconding as soon as he's released from prison, all the way out of his district to San Francisco, which is anybody's going to get put right back in the prison. You don't
again,
do that.
That's a smoking gun. That's true. Yeah,
they give him immediately. They give him a new parole officer who happens to be a CIA asset. Clearly, right?
So he definitely wasn't shying away from the MK Ultra stuff, in my opinion.
No, not that part.
Yeah.
And Dave but McGowan, there was nothing. There was no connection at all to the process, though. And now that all I'm saying is like, at least for me, I think that there's a massive implication there, especially because you have members of the process going directly from headquarters to go talk to Bugliosi, the prosecutor. And it's so strange. And they get this one-on-one interview with Manson and come out with an article for the Process magazine written by Manson, called the issue of the magazine was called Death. And it's the craziest fucking story because Manson was 100%, like he was exposed to the practices of the process at this renegade OTO lodge in Pasadena, right?
Yeah, I bet. I mean, that sounds familiar. And the OTO, they will sue you if you write that stuff. So it is quite possible. That's what they did to Maury Terry. They sued him.
Exactly.
And it is possible that this guy, the Chaos author's approach is kind of like what Dave McGowan would just give you all the facts and you would have to put them together. Yeah. The process OTO thing, I think Maury Terry was probably right about it, and still he lost the case.
Yeah, no, for sure. But it's so much more than that, because when you realize that there's these connections directly tying in Sharon Tate's murder to elements of the process, it's that alone. I mean, you don't even have to mention the OTO, and you can, you know what I mean? And
all the satanic thing around it, like her last movie or one of her last movies was that satanic movie. Rosemary's Baby was Polanski's movie. Sharon Tate did a movie where she was like, her last movie was something that literally was, let me just look it up. I think it was, Satan's Bride or something crazy like that. Yeah.
All the weird videos they found.
The LAPD, they claimed 100%. They basically explained like a sort of gang rape scenario that had been filmed by Polanski, and that Sharon Tate didn't look like she was really enjoying it.
Oh
right?
my gosh.
Yeah, 100%.
So what, they had the film? I can't remember that. Maybe
they said they had the film, but it's of course never seen the light of day, but very strange. A lot of LAPD officers claim that they saw it personally when they reported to the scene. But leading up to the murders though, right?
So I might have been Eye of the Devil, the Fearless Vampire Killers, the 13 Chairs, but it must have been Eye of the Devil. That was the one that was crazy.
Well,
sorry,
that Mama Cass Elliot was like so tied in with what was happening there. Alexander Butterfield in the Nixon administration even came out and like, I think he had direct ties with Mama Cass Elliot, and her handler was the man she fell in love with, who inevitably helped her with her own demise, even though she had no drugs in her system. It's very strange how she died. And allegedly, Tex Watson, I forget the Manson girl that was involved, but they were pissed off because a drug deal had transpired, and they got basically they just got screwed over, and so they wanted revenge for that, on top of a few other things, because I guess it was largely through Mama Cass Elliot was how they were like smuggling and funneling a lot of these MK Ultra style drugs at the time into this weird, network of these individuals who were tied in with Manson and the process. And so Alex Constantine, he wrote like a whole article about Mama Cass Elliot and her connections to the Manson murders, and how she was basically murdered for her role that she played, and was an intelligence asset from day one as far as the career of the Mamas and the Papas, which is just crazy. And especially with Terry Melcher and all the other,
Yes.
Yeah.
That's Doris Day's son.
Yeah.
Doris Day. Yeah. And the Beach Boys,
the Golden
like, all
Penetrators was the name of their group. Yeah.
Yikes.
The Golden Penetrators with the Beach Boys guy. And so, but just really quickly, because I think that you would love this, as far as the leading up to the murders, right? Of Sharon Tate.
Real quick, we did let Monica know we'd try to get her out around here.
Oh, shit.
That's all right. I got 2 more minutes. Let's go to a quarter after.
Yeah.
I just heard that my son got home.
My bad.
Wow. Yeah, no, we're good.
I haven't been looking at the time, I'll be honest.
No, it's great. It's fine. I'm having a good time.
Awesome. But anyway, I do think it's at least worth mentioning that Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski had been in Rome with Hollywood manager and owner of the infamous Cielo Drive house, Rudy Altobelli. And according to the official records from the IRS, they were also in Rome at the very same time as one Robert de Grimston, who Manson infamously said, when asked about Robert de Grimston, "We are one and the same."
Yeah, what did he mean by that? That is in the Maury Terry book.
And he's literally quoting the Bible. As far as that's what he's referencing, which is fucking crazy to me. But
I mean, a lot of people may not realize this. I mean, this is pretty common knowledge. But Roman, what did he get busted for? A 14-year-old boy later in life, or something like that?
Was it a boy? I thought it was
maybe it was a girl. Maybe it was a girl.
I think it was a young girl. I think wasn't she in his family somehow?
I don't recall the specifics.
Didn't he abuse? Shit, I can't remember the details. I don't want to mess up.
He's not an upstanding fella.
Exactly, not at all.
Yeah,
but of course, 5 days after the murder,
there you go.
That makes sense. I thought for some reason she was like involved with his family somehow, but I'm not. I could be wrong.
Drugs. It says unlawful, whatever, Grex with a minor, rape by use of drugs, perversion, sodomy, lewd and lascivious act upon a child, furnishing controlled substance to a minor. Oh my gosh.
He can't return to the U.S., right? He's banned.
It says he later accepted a plea bargain, but I bet that was way later. Yeah, it looks like 2008.
That's crazy.
It says her name, for crying out loud, but it doesn't say that he asked her mother if he could photograph her.
Okay.
And that's how they. Anyway.
That's crazy.
Yikes. I mean,
was that in the States or was that overseas? Was it in the States?
He said it was the French Vogue. But I thought the crime was committed here, but I already clicked off on it. But
whatever.
But yeah, so Sharon, I always wondered if he was in on her demise.
It's crazy. It gets even crazier than that, but just for the sake of time, honestly, I want to transition for one last thing that I had mentioned in our DM that I was desperate to finish telling you about.
Yeah, I want to hear
what I
it.
recently discovered when I had mentioned and brought up Sherry Seymour earlier. It was basically not only were the the Native Americans on Cabazon being used as essentially slave labor, but the operatives were also flying. They were even flying in Mexican nationals to produce and cook meth on the reservation. And so Sherry Seymour, she sort of traced all of this back to an organization in Fresno called The Company, which was comprised of about 300 former military personnel and law enforcement officers. They were importing, I think she said billions, but I'll say millions just to be a little more rational, but it could very well be. But millions of dollars of narcotics from Latin America. This company owned ships, airplanes. They were performing mercenary operations and gun running. And all of this was published in the San Francisco Chronicle in 82 to 83. And there had also, apparently, I have to track down this original source article because I just found this earlier today. So I want
that
to
was Gary Webb's paper, right?
Yep. So,
and he was writing about that at that time.
Yeah,
See, that's the thing. Was that his research or her research? Like, that's what I wonder.
Isn't that crazy? That very well could be the case, actually, now that you're saying that. But nonetheless, it's such a crazy story because there had also been a joint venture between the Cabazon Indian Reservation and Wackenhut Security Corporation to develop esoteric weapons like the rail gun and even included biological warfare.
Yeah, because they can do stuff like that when it's not federal property, which is what was probably going on in Ukraine.
Oh, no doubt. I would not at all be surprised. But the Wackenhut Corporation was originally founded in 1954 in Coral Gables, Florida, by George Wackenhut and three partners who were all former FBI agents. But in 1983, Wackenhut they received this 3-year, $81 million contract at the Savannah River Nuclear Weapons Facility in South Carolina, which was the largest paramilitary security contract ever awarded by the U.S. government at that time. And so Wackenhut outbid 18 other bidders to win the contract and brought in 460 uniformed security professionals and 50 administrative support personnel as part of just this single contract. But here's where it gets fucking insane.
They brought hundreds of people onto that reservation? Wow.
Here's where it gets insane. In 2002, the company was acquired for $570 million by this Danish corporation group, Falk. Itself then merged to form this company called G4S in 2004. Now in 2010, G4S Wackenhut changed its name to G4S Secure Solutions, and its America's region headquarters is in Jupiter, Florida. So on June 12th, 2016, Omar Mateen, who worked at G4S from 2007 until his death, committed one of the largest mass shootings in United States history at the Pulse nightclub.
And his dad has a picture in the Oval Office, by the way.
God.
Which you know what they do that for. You know why they give you pictures like that? Because when you're out like making drug deals or arms deals in Syria, whatever, you're like, you know, they call me al-Baghdadi, but here's a picture of me with John McCain. Yep. Obviously, I'm not that guy.
100%.
And, yeah.
George Wackenhut himself had a picture with the president in his office. But
yeah,
it's crazy. So Mateen's employment as an armed guard, of course, what they like to say is help facilitate his access to firearms. But more so, I think is interesting that he had firearms refresher courses he took each 4 years at G4S. The company's inability to detect prior warning signals brought it under widespread scrutiny. Now, in 2010, Mateen was videotaped while working security for G4S at a site related to the BP oil spill. And the claim that Mateen had a family connection to Al-Qaeda and has said that he was a member of Hezbollah happened to originate from his co-workers at G4S, the security contracting firm. So this is apparently when the county sheriff's office called in the FBI. And according to reports from the Miami Herald and the New York Times, when G4S became aware that the FBI was investigating Mateen, they did not dismiss Mateen, but transferred him to the South Guardhouse of the PGA Village, a gated community in Palm Beach County. So the last point.
Like a golf place? PGA?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the FBI director, James Comey, would later repeat the claims allegedly made by Mateen's G4S co-workers that Mateen had made statements to his co-workers that were inflammatory and contradictory, and he claimed a family connection to Al-Qaeda and said he was a member of Hezbollah, a bitter enemy of the Islamic State. This is Comey's quote. He said he hoped law enforcement would raid his apartment and assault his wife and child so he could martyr himself.
Oh my gosh, Comey
I
is a
just thought,
created person. He's like,
yeah,
I think they
oh
gave
yeah,
him like the psychopath test when he was 17, and because he
no,
was such a liar. And they're like,
exactly.
wow, I've
Mhm.
never met anybody like you before. He's not a great actor, but he's just so committed to the stories. But I
Right,
mean, Al Qaeda and Hezbollah are probably both CIA operations anyway.
100%.
So I get that. And this is one thing that people have just come to accept. But
Mhm.
prior to the modern era of mass shootings and this kind of psyop,
Yeah.
there's a book, there was an essay, it was Harvard Law Review, and it was, do more guns mean more crime or more murder, something like that. There's that great book by John Lott, More Guns, Less Crime. That's a great book. But this was, it was Harvard Law Review, and
Mhm.
it was pretty well documented. And those guys, it said that it was basically unheard of for someone's first crime to be gun murder.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely unheard of.
Right.
So that idea that people are going to buy a gun to go kill somebody is just not. Usually, the people who want a gun urgently are people who need to defend themselves, who are
Yeah.
afraid. So when they have waiting periods, it results in more homicide, right? But so when they have these things like, okay, this guy supposedly killed hundreds of people or dozens of people,
Right.
the hit rate is so incredibly high. If you've never shot at people, I mean, it
Mhm.
would take like an experienced military grade sniper to do something like these stories. You just accept them, like maybe did it, maybe this. It's not possible. It's just
Yeah.
not possible. And it's just like it's not possible to get shot and 1 second later you're like, fight. It's no, you're literally having convulsions when you're at that level. Have you ever had like real shock or terror? Yeah, you shake so much that you can't, it's just your body does something chemically. It's just impossible to me.
I'm
And I
telling you.
actually was talking to a doctor recently, kind of a normie guy, but not, not crazy normie.
Mhm.
And I said, he's like, oh, you have a podcast? I said, don't listen to it. Please don't listen to it. You're going to think I'm crazy, and I'm not crazy. And I want to be friends like your neighbor, whatever. And I said, for example, I think the Trump thing was totally fake. He said, oh, I do too. I said, what? Why would you think that? He's like, because I'm a doctor, and there's just no way you can just pop up and
That's so
have
funny.
that kind of composure. And I'm thinking, this doesn't rock your world. It's like when people think,
Right.
yeah, JFK was an inside job, but whatever. I'm like, how does that not? Don't you realize that that's never been exposed? Which means the
It's
same
paradigm
people, like you
shifting.
were saying, like the
Yeah.
same people must still be in control, or it would have been revealed. Like the
Yeah.
first guy who gets in there who's not totally under the thumb. So it amazes me, yeah, when people know there's like the whole Seymour Hersh Democrat, where
Right.
until Obama, they all knew it was an inside job of Republicans. And then Obama's like, please don't say that anymore. And they're like, okay. It's like, why would you say okay? He is an inside job. Like, that's why he
Mhm.
said that. Like, what's the problem? So anyway, I just think it's not those things. It's just not possible.
All right, Monica, we gotta let you get out of here. Where can they find you at?
Thank you so much. Well, you can listen to all of my shows on the Monica Perez Show feed on your favorite podcasting platform. And I put all my show notes and everything like that, monicaperezshow.com. Tomorrow, I'm recording a new endeavor with Hrvoje Moric and Parallel Mike. We're doing a show called Cognitive Dissidence. And it's those guys are definitely going to strain my brain. I'm going to have to have extra espresso before hanging out with those guys. But I'm very excited about that little endeavor. And what else? I do a live show on just all the kind of video streaming on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2:00 Pacific. I'm such a New Yorker that I cannot get my mind around the fact that like I'm the Pacific one. 2:00 Pacific, 5:00 Eastern. But I love it when people come hang out because the chat is so engaging, and I miss live radio. I miss the live thing. So I like it when people just tune in, and then you get no commercials, which is fun.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Awesome.
I gotta say just one last thing to you, Monica. I had mentioned earlier off air privately that you've kind of had like you've contributed deeply to my personal path, and I very much appreciate your perspective. Like, I've learned a lot from you, and also you were pivotal in throughout COVID when I felt so lonely in my ideas, in my moral and ethical foundation, and yeah, very isolated, and you were one of just one of the top few that I could rely on. And also, like I said before, I could send one of your episodes to even my mother, and she would be perfectly willing to open-mindedly, consider your ideas. And I just think everything you're doing is so valuable, and I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on.
I'm so complimented that I could have an impact, and that your mom would listen. I mean, I did try to kind of reach across the aisle, but halfway through the COVID thing, if you were not like laughing at some of their claims. But yes, and as I said, like probably the best thing I other than would have raised a family, that if I made a contribution to this world, it was just the community that we formed. I knew people who met each other through the Propaganda Report, Discord, or whatever, who started podcasts, like numerous. I can think of 4 off the top of my head. And I just love that, because this is how we make connections. Because we're not going to make the connections in our own communities. There's not one neighbor I would feel comfortable. I don't even want them to listen to my show. I won't tell them I have a podcast.
So crazy.
Yeah, and this is how we stay sane. And it's this is a limited hangout, this internet, and we can make the most of it. And I love that I had a positive impact. Thank you so much.
Hanging out for a limited time. Austin, where can they find you at, bud?
Yeah, just follow me on Instagram at the Underclass Podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Underclass Pod. You can check out, any of my work at the Underclass Podcast. It's definitely subscribe to the YouTube. I'll probably do the Esalen Institute or something this time around.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think that would be fun.
Ask me about that, Stuart Brand. Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds good. But yeah, that's it, guys. I appreciate you.
Well, you guys can follow me on Twitter at TowerGangJose. Obviously, I'm on YouTube, all the major Oddball Catchers, Rumble as well, all No Way Jose. Obviously, this show is hosted on No Way Jose and on Austin's channel on Underclass. So pick one. I don't care. Do one or the other. It doesn't matter. But definitely follow along. But if you want to support me monetarily, it's over at patreon.com. Just No Way Jose 2020. The lowest level is $2. That gives you the early episodes and also allows you to be a talking head for these if you want to. You could be alongside me, Austin, or you could have been alongside Monica for this episode. Also, my highest level is my sponsors. I read them off every episode. I have my co-host on Tower Gang at Tower Gang Toad. I have at Abrogate D's at ZOVERACK, then at _Infinite Zeal, then Jacob Daniel of the Biblical Anarchy Podcast at Biblical Anarchy, and the homie Tim Tuttle at Jolly on Klebold. Go vote for him in the great edit war that's happening on Twitter right now, which is dope.
That is fun, dude.
It's fun. And then also my buddy Will Bell, who has this blueberry rabbit eye wine, delicious stuff. Go check it out. You can get that online. And with that, we are out. Bye-bye.